having the conversation already with Professor Utomi, and perhaps the way I'm grilling him off the camera may not be as much as what I'm doing to him when we get into camera. Gentlemen, just give me a moment, because I literally dragged Professor Utomi out of that event where he is. Let me spend some few minutes with him, then I'll come back to the studio. Prof, it's good to see you, and happy independence to you.
Same indeed to you.
Yeah. So I was saying earlier, off the camera, that, and I'll list a few things that your generation benefited as we look at 64-year journey, and then those who have said that, how did we get here as a people? Your generation was the generation that finished as graduates and got Pojo vehicle, brand new. Your generation spent almost nothing in going to university. Your generation had scholarship to Harvard, to Cambridge, on the bills of the state. Your generation had half a chicken for lunch. Your generation, I've been hearing Utomi all my life. Your generation have ruled Nigeria for the last 30, 40 years, but yet you've bequeathed almost nothing to our generation. The question is that you and your friends of your generation, how did you get us here?
Yeah, Seun, thank you so much. We can make light of it and joke, but it's not a joking matter. 15 years ago or thereabouts, I think I wrote an op-ed piece in The Guardian that was titled "The Generation That Left Town." And what I was trying to reflect on was that the generation in which this country invested enormously into, in terms of the things you've talked about, quality education and all of that. And I'm saying that generation has never really governed Nigeria. That generation, when they could have governed, the soldiers who were in power governed in a way that made many of the people from my generation I disagree with them, opt to leave town. And literally, the diaspora we know of today is the effect of the frustration of the educated elite from my generation with Nigeria. And my argument, and which is part of the reason that I am building up this so-called new tribe, is to get heavy diaspora give back. To say, look, ask not what your country can do for you, because your country did something for you before. If you saw the telethon that we were on yesterday, we had a cardiologist in Atlanta, Dr. Olatidoye, an ER surgeon, Dr. Adisa, Dr. Emeruwa from California, and the comprehensive ideas that they have come up with within the new tribe umbrella to give back into Nigeria, to change the medical healthcare system, all completely, free, of themselves. So maybe that's the way my generation is paying back for leaving town. But I agree with you. There is a lot of accounting to be done. And those of us who chose to stay and fight the rot, we have paid a very dear price, but there's no price you can pay that's enough for building a country. Look, I was just saying at the event where I am engaged right now, which I have to run back into in the next 5-10 minutes, that spending more time in the United States as I'm doing right now, 70% of black doctors in America are Nigerian. 10% of all the pharmacists in Maryland are Nigerian. Nigerians are now, because of the high income of most of these people, considered perhaps the most well-off ethnic nationality group in all of North America. The thing is, how do we transfer this accomplishment outside Nigeria, because their country did not give them room to try and build their country? How do we now still reverse so that brain drain becomes brain gain? It is possible, and we're working very hard at it. But there is no question that Nigeria's position place today is a leadership failure problem. Look, Seun, we have converted what is our biggest strength, our diversity, into a weakness. You take that diversity and just look at culture and selling culture from different parts of Nigeria. What that means. There's a restaurant in Washington now called The Continent by 3 Nigerians, Igbo, Yoruba. They came together. Fantastic restaurant. I took President Obasanjo there when he came to visit last month, and he's still talking about the suya that we eat there. Look, Nigeria has great strength in its diversity, but weak, horrible politicians have chosen to exploit it in a manner where emotion has trumped reason, and the gap between us and them is widening every day. You look at the American melting pot. Why don't they say you are a Korean, you are a Vietnamese, you are an Italian American, you are Irish American? Because those who led America, its founding fathers, had such great vision and wrote one of the greatest constitutions in human history and built institutions that allowed for that melting pot culture to enable Americans become amongst the greatest people on the planet.
Yeah,
Prof. I think that leadership can help us turn this around in our country.
So I made a joke about a firing squad. I mean, not literally, though. But what I meant when I was,
Sheung, I'm willing to go to the firing squad if it will stop the mess in Nigeria. I assure you, I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, because the reason why I made that, and when we were having a pre-chat prior to this interview, and I confronted you. I said, some of those who have crossed the age of 40 in my generation will look back and say, what have we been able? We've got a lot. And some of you, for example, you are 27, you were partaking in governance. You had your part to play in government. And there are those who will say, in the last 25 years of this democracy, is the same names that we have heard. In the last 64 years of our nationhood, we've always experienced virtually the same set of faces, the same set of people, similar ideas. And there are no contemporary input of this generation into how things are to go. So you talked about leadership problem. Where do we go from here if you and your friends in your generation have bequeathed what we have today? When are you leaving the scene so that those of our generation can actually have their own input and new style to be infused in leadership?
You know, Sheung, it was George Orwell who said that those who elect corrupt politicians are not victims, they are accomplices. So part of what has happened to Nigeria is that there is this middle that has become complicit. Your generation is complicit. I wrote this book, Why Not? Which I talked about state capture, keeping fascism, and the criminal hijack of politics in Nigeria. And the central theme of that book is essentially the complicit middle. Your generation could have acted to get rid of these people a long time ago. You mentioned that I was in a presidential advisory position at 27. That is correct. It did not come from Godfather or anything. I just showed up, and John, Momo, and co, I think were young fellows on television back then. And the Director General said to Mohammed Ibrahim, put that guy on television. And I was talking on television, and President and Vice President saying, who is that boy? Can we find him? Look, we had leaders that thought that way in those days. But today, now all they think of is, who is from my village? Who will do this or that for me? That's what we need to change in Nigeria. If we change that, our country is reclaimable. We can win. I just finished saying at the other event where I'm still talking that in 1991, India was technically bankrupt. 3 weeks trading money. Everything was going south. And today, India is the economy in the world, literally, that everybody's turning to. In the next 25 years, it'll be the second largest economy in the world. If India can do it, we can do it.
So the question,
I used to give examples from Singapore.
The question I will ask you, Prof,
and how leadership changed things.
Yes. The question I will ask you, apart from giving you an assignment to make a list of those of you who have stopped this generation from emerging. It's a fact that
be clear. What you said to me was to list those who should go before the Paris Court.
I will confess
I said I will list all of them.
Yes.
I add myself, even if I did nothing about where we are.
So,
but I add myself. If my blog,
I will hold you accountable. I will hold you accountable, and you be the secretary to list those of you who are culpable in not allowing this generation to emerge, because there needs to be an emergence of a new tribe, a new generation, young mind, ultra-modern spirit and soul that can change around this country. And the question I will ask you, Prof, where do we start from? Just before you go, where do we start? A new dimension into, we're going to be 65 next year. So we have 1 year into thinking differently. Not only when I'm saying where do we start from, I'm not talking about politics alone. I'm talking about private sector, because the private sector is supposed to even be the core of a generation and societal change. Where do we start from?
It's more fundamental. It's even more fundamental than public sector, private sector. But let me take on both sides quickly. On the side of public sector, private sector, and all of that, what I have advocated for years, and again, it's nothing extraordinarily original. In 1985, there was a conference in Nairobi, Kenya, that talked about a tripartite approach to governing, where the private sector, the public sector, and the social enterprise sector, as we now call it, govern almost like equals and hold each other accountable. That led to what was called the Enabling Environment Forum, which became the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, which unfortunately did not go the way the ideas were supposed to go. So that's one in terms of structure of governing that can change things. But more importantly, the biggest challenge we have is culture is in collapse in Nigeria. Values shape human progress. How do we get a values revolution? Institutions are critical for human progress. If we can commit to building stronger institutions that push back on people who do not do right, and the rule of law is fully in place. Look at our judiciary, it's a laughing stock, it's a joke. No country can make real progress without a judiciary that you can rely on. Look at the other institutions, whether it's INEC or this or that, they are weak. How do we ensure that we build strong institutions and that we have values that really ensure that character matters and that people of character can show a light? We can do it. It's completely doable. I am absolutely confident because I've seen it happen in human history. If you go and read Jonathan Tupperman and just look at how such policies were implemented in this age of decline, and the example of Singapore and corruption, and even the idea that I suggested into the so-called roadmap of the last administration, the Bosa Familia idea, and how Nacio Lula da Silva implemented that in Brazil, but we didn't manage to implement it here like it should have been implemented because of our values. Ultimately, values shape human progress. Right. When we have real values and people of character and commitment to service are in positions of public authority, our country will turn around. We have the ingredients, the human capital that it takes to show the way.
Professor Utomi, it's always a pleasure. I wish we had more time. When you please come to Abuja, there is a restaurant I would like to take you. It's probably better than that one in DC that you took President Obasanjo to. So it's a way of luring you. And don't forget your assignment. Bring the list of those of you culpable in dragging our nation to this point. But thank you so much.
Go to the Paris Court.
Thank you so much, Professor Utomi, for speaking to us tonight.